Good evening, folks. This old Buster coming to you again. Got another little story, Ben Sunday's all. We hope you like it. This one's called Snakes. Well, lots of tricking, but ain't no treating. Well, not really. All the boys was good-hearted and would share anything with the others, you know. Buster just weren't no trickster with that dad-burned Walter, and Hired was something else, I tell you. And that Walter been the worstest one of 'em all. Well, little Jesse liked a good joke as well as the next feller, but was closer to Buster than his'n thinking. One day all the boys were gathered round when old Doc Adams come up to the house. Doc done showed their paws and some of the local fellers that logged there about some newfangled snake bite cure. Had to do with electrocating the body with a gizmo Doc invented. Well, old Doc really took a shine to them four boys, and when he left he done give Walter one of them gadgets but told him not to tell, 'cause he was a-selling them all. The thing had a battery in it, and boy would it shock the fool out of you. Well, Walter done got saddled with an egg-sucking old hound, so he went and caught him in that there hen house of his'n. And he caught that darn hound with it, and did he ever let out a howl and lit a shuck. High-tailed it plumb out the county with his leg and a twitching and tail betwixt his legs. So Walter knew what that gizmo would do to a feller, and he just had to prank somebody to see what it would do to him and get a laugh at that. Well, all the boys was over by the A&P getting on toward the soda fountain at the drugstore when they seed a bunch of boys that come on into town from Plum Bayou. They all got to talking and walked in and sat right down by the big picture window there at the leak soda fountain at the drugstore. Well, Hired was over by the picture window, and the rest of the boys was all sitting round about the table when they got a jawing on the gizmo that Doc was showing folks that he invented. Well, all of them was a-wondering what in the heck it did to cure a snake bite, a spider bite, waspers, or any other type of venomous critter. Well, you know that opened the door for Walter. Well, as Walter pulled that gizmo out into his pocket, he accidentally turned the thing on. Now, Walter might be a trickster, but he don't really mean to hurt nobody, but this time he done it. All them boys got to scrambling, but Hired was stuck behind the table there and just wasn't fast enough to get out the way. Well, Walter didn't know the gizmo was on and was just a-scaring the boys a mite when he touched Hired with the gizmo. Well, boy, oh boy, Hired went plumb through Leak's window, picture window, and bounced off it like a rubber ball. His eyes rolled up like window shades, and he went to doing the St. Vitus dance. He hopped around there a-hooping and a-hollering like he's been killed. Well, Walter done told him he was sure sorry, but Hired weren't in no forgiving mood right about then, you know. After a spell, things settled on down, and Walter done told Hired he was mighty sorry again and bought him a cherry coke and for making up. Of course, Hired done had it in his mind about what the last thing Walter done to him when he was sick and was coming back from Hired's house to his house. He told him just to eat a raw onion. Well, Hired went and ate the onion, and he was sick and throwed up all the way at home. Was sick for might near 4 days after that. He couldn't hardly do no chores. Lord, Walter been a trickster. The gizmo sure enough worked wonders for all the folks in them parts when they got bit by something that Ajax wouldn't wash off. Walter told the story about his and egg-sucking hound, and did admit that he was a-wondering what it would do to a feller, and was right proud his friend Hired was the guinea pig. Of course, Hired wasn't no too proud about it, that's for sure. He sure was a whirling dervish for a spell there, but he really didn't mean to spark Hired. Now, Hired didn't say nary a word about the sparking incident, and the boys had a tickle in private, but didn't take no guff about teasing Hired about it, 'cause he just getting your eyes like a coon. If you wanted 4 boys to tussle just to keep the teasing Hired about the sparking. What y'all don't know is Hired would catch anything that crawled. Rattlers, copperheads, cottonmouths, water mocks, didn't make no never mind. Hired weren't scared a bit of 'em. Would catch 'em behind the hide and the tail, and he didn't care where he caught 'em, he just caught 'em. Now all the boys' pa got together for a barn raising at the same time and had the boys plow up a field for Hired's pa. Walter done sprung up a bit and drove anything on wheels like Buster did, so he hupped and got on the tractor. Well, all the work was a-going just fine, and women folk done cooked up one heck of a dinner. The dinner bell was a-ringing, and them boys lit out to the feed table like greased lightning. Of course, Buster's in the lead on that, you know. Well, Hired had to bite and excuse himself to the outhouse. This and the Hired Spa had a half moon and some stars carved in the door and was a two-holer, and even had an old Sears catalog, Sears and Roebuck that is, catalog for company. Mostly they had corn shucks and corn cobs, and they got a little rashly at times, you know. The boys sneaked off behind a stand of hickory trees and lit up some Prince Albert. Old Dump had given to them over at Wright last week when they delivered some cordwood over there. Well, Dump was the old man that owned the old River Plantation's hired man. That's who he was. He helped Buster build that fence down there, you know, that quarter-mile fence. Well, anyhow, he'd been with him forever, old Dump had. He's a good feller. And one heck of a fence builder, too. And, you know, that last summer that Buster was kind of stove up a bit with that bad shoulder, it's when they built that quarter square mile fence. Well, anyhow, Buster left on out for a spell to see his real pap in Ohio about that time, and he won't see what the boy looked like because he ain't never seen him. Anyhow, Hired done went out and caught himself a bull snake. Looks like a rattler, but harmless, he says. Eats other snakes is what he does, says Hired. When Walter clumb back on that tractor and sit down on that seat like a big dog, you know, like he was really something gonna drive that tractor, that snake done crawled out from under the seat and started to crawl up Walter's breeches leg. He come a loose like he was shot out of cannon. Done turned white, green, about 4 shades of purple, and was a spitting and a fuming and looking for his shotgun. Well, old Hired and the boys was fit to be tied of Billy laughing. They laughed till they cried, just doubled over and lost their air even. Well, the men folk come over about that time when they heard all the commotion, and they bellered and just had a high old time on old Walter. Well, Hired asked Walter if and he was all right, as he done skunned his and shin and elbow coming off that tractor. Well, Walter took it in good stride and told Hired he done got him good. Well, everybody laughed and then went on back to work, you know. Well, Buster done told y'all about the boys putting that garter snake in Mrs. Metz's desk drawer at the schoolhouse. I know he must have mentioned that. Them boys in something all the time. The woman just swooned and went into a dead faint for a minute there. She couldn't stand being around no snake, and I guess I told you pencil shavings too. The boy was always into something, and snakes seemed to be at that year with a Hired catching all manner of them. Well, Buster took the boys from the scouts canoeing on the Buffalo River down there. It was the last wild river in the United States, and he knowed it like the back of his hand. An Indian feller he met up with taught him every twist and turn and whirlpool in it. Knowed all the best fishing and swimming holes to boot. Well, this one weekend they all gathered up and took to carrying their canoes to the water. Well, this one little feller just couldn't hold up his end of that dang canoe, but it was light as a feather too, you know, so it shouldn't have been no problem, but he just couldn't do it, didn't have no stout in him. Now, a feller from school named Charlie Henson just had a fit because that boy couldn't tote his and half of the load, and they couldn't get their canoe in the water, let alone paddle with the rest of the group. Well, Buster jumped out of his canoe and run over and grabbed a hold of the canoe and run off to the river and set her in that water and hollered for the boys to get in, and his time was a-wasted. Them two was right comical now. They couldn't get that canoe to go in the right direction and was a-turning and a-twisting every which way. Well, finally Buster got them lined out, and they was moving along pretty good. And all of a sudden, there was the biggest ruckus. You ain't never heard such a caterwauling. It was coming from them two boys. Well, old Charlie was a-paddling up a storm and was a-going nowhere. The little feller was a-hitting at something in the bottom of their canoe and a-squalling and a-hollering, "Oh, get out!" Well, Charlie hollered over to Buster that snake done dropped into the canoe from a limb they was going under, and the little feller was trying to kill it with his paddle. Well, the little feller didn't paddle worth a wooden nickel, and he hit the limb and knocked the water moccasin in the canoe with him. How he done that, Buster didn't know, but it was sure a sight to see. That little feller wore that paddle to a nub and knocked holes all in the bottom of that canoe. Well, the canoe was a sinking, Charlie was a cussing, Buster was a laughing, and the little feller was a hollering and a crying scared to death of that snake. Well, they all ended up in the water. Snake went one way and the boys another. Water wasn't waist deep, so they waded on out, you know. That was the end of the canoeing for them two. They had to drag out what was left of the canoe and just sit on the bank till everybody come back. Well, the little feller's mama come and got him and took him on back to Little Rock. Well, Charlie was all huffed up because he didn't have no fun and now no partner and no canoe to boot. Just sat in the camp the rest of the weekend. Well, Buster said he never would forget that sight, though. That little feller just a banging holes in that canoe trying to hit that snake, and Charlie a cussing and a paddling going nowhere but in circles. Too funny, he said. Now I got one on Jesse. You know, Jesse is the littlest of the four boys, but let me tell you, dynamite comes in small packages. Jesse just don't get in no trouble unless the other three get him in it. The boy will probably grow up to be a lawyer or something, smart as a whip too, you know. Well, Jesse's people are mighty fine too, salt of the earth. His and mama is a real southern lady, and his and pa, well, no finer man in the county. Didn't allow no clown on his place neither now. Wasn't scared of him a bit, knowed them all anyhow. Jesse was a driving before any of us. Had an uncle that liked to take a snort or two and had Jesse drive him around and would give Jesse a quarter to do it. One Christmas he give Jesse a $5 bill. And well, he shared it with all us boys too, you know. Of course, his aunt and his mama didn't know nothing about all that, not even to this day. Well, Jesse didn't like no snake neither. He knowed how Buster felt that time when Buster was a hunting and a walking canal bank on his and Grandpa's farm and seed that cottonmouth. That snake come right after Buster, and Buster had his and shotgun with him and just up and pulled the trigger. Buster was a carrying it pointed to the ground, he said, and just pulled the trigger without a thinking. Said he felt the wind on his leg and as the shot went by and hit the snake that was about to bite him. Well, anyway, Jesse went on a camping trip his and mama fixed up for him. None of the boys went there either, they just him. Somehow none of the boys didn't go along, and that was plumb out of the ordinary because they done everything together, you know. Well, Jesse said all the fellas there went a-fishing and just a-messing around a bit till after supper and then went to their tents and their sleeping bags. Like I said, Jesse don't like no snake. One of the boys figured he'd pull a trick on little Jesse. They done caught an eel on the trot line and brought it on back to camp. They figured to pick on the littlest fella there, but that was their first mistake, I'm here to tell you. When they started to put that there eel on Jesse and his sleeping bag, Jesse come out of there like a duck on a June bug. That was their second and last mistake. Old Jesse done had his and fire lit, and he took to thrashing them boys like Sherman went through Georgia. He done whooped the boy with the eel real good and proper, and the other with him got a poke or two before he took off to running. Rest of them boys figured out real quick that Jesse wasn't one to be trifled with. I'm here to tell you that now. Well, Jesse said he didn't know what happened to that eel, but the feller that tried to put it on him left the next day with a bloody nose, busted lip, and 2 black eyes. Boy done run into a bobcat, huh? Old Jesse could hold his own, I tell you. His friends could stand good for that. Been with old Jesse too long, all their lives. Well, that was pretty much for the snakes that year, excepting when Hire done put 3 rattlers in his and Mama Frigidaire. Said he was a-cooling them down so they wouldn't wiggle as much. Like to give his and Mama a heart attack. Believe supper was late that night. And Hire didn't do no more of that, I tell you. His and Paul done told Hire he was going to go to the woodshed if that happened again. Reckon the boys will be up to some mischief again pretty soon. But they is real good boys now. Walter will probably be a president someday and Hire doctoring something or someone, and Jesse a lawyerin', and Buster a writing. Well, see, they got lots of living to do. Till them days come round, you know. Days a ending, the night birds a calling, the larks in the field a singing. Lightning bugs a glowing tonight, and stars a shining bright. Lord was good to us today. Y'all have a blessed day. It's the old Buster signing out.